David Teems is a singer, songwriter, and author. He's authored a brand new book called Godspeed, Voices of the Reformation, and in it he features the words of notable reformers such as Wycliffe, Martin Luther, Tyndale, and so many others. And he's also going to sing for us on today's show. So stay tuned, for Babbie's House is coming to you right now.
Every day is filled with possibility. At Babbie's house, Babbie's house, everybody is family. Welcome to Babbie's house.
Welcome to Babbie's house. Everybody is a member of the family. That includes you. Thanks for joining me today on the show. I'm so happy to introduce to you a good friend of mine. We go back a few days now. David Teems is a fine singer, songwriter, and author, and he's written a brand new book called Godspeed, Voices of the Reformation. David, I'm so happy to see you, my friend.
Oh, I'm always tickled to be with you.
I'm saying, man, tickled to see you.
But we have to do this. Is only, just
this is how we get together, right?
Right.
Because you, I'll tell you, David, you have been one of those people. You love the Word of God, and you love the words that the people of God have written.
True.
And particularly those who are from the past centuries.
True.
And those voices of truth, those voices that are foundational, and you're keeping those words and those voices alive. We're going to talk about your beautiful book called Godspeed. It's awesome. So so let's kick things off.
Sure.
With
this
David
is a
Teems.
song.
That's
from
right.
William Tyndale's translation.
So sing for us, all right? Welcome to the show, my friend.
I love you.
I love you too.
So everything's true. Whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, there be any virtue, there be any praise, think on these things. Whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, there be any virtue, there be any praise, think on these things.
Whatsoever things are, whatsoever things are honest,
Get a little bit mellow now. What a friend we have in Jesus. My griefs and sins to bear. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. What grief we forfeit. Oh, what needless pain we bear. All because we do not care. Everything to God in prayer. Are you weak and heavy laden? Burdened with a load of care. Jesus knows our every weakness. Take it to the Lord in care. When I tarry, no one needs pain to bear. All because we do not care. Everything to God, everything to God, everything to God in prayer. My Jesus, I love thee. I know thou art mine. For thee all follies of sin I resign. I love you forever, my Savior art thou. If ever I love thee, my Jesus. Jesus, 'tis now. I love you in life. I love you in death. Praise you as long as thou lendest me breath. Say when the death do lies cold on my brow. If ever I love thee, my Jesus, my Jesus, my Jesus. Yes, now.
Well, welcome back to Babbie's house. I'm so happy to have a dear friend as our very special guest today. David Teems is a profound singer, which you've already heard, a great writer, which you've already heard, an arranger. But David is a person who loves the word, and he loves old words. And he has a beautiful poetic and even prophetic voice that is indicative in his writing. He is the author of Godspeed, Voices of the Reformation, and in it in this beautiful book, he treasures as he features the words of the reformers. And will you help me to welcome to Babbie's house, welcome back to Babbie's house, as a matter of fact, David Teems. David, my friend, it's good to see you.
Oh, I don't even have words.
I know, right?
But I'm supposed to be good with words, and I don't have them.
Well,
it's really
you
great
are
being
very
you
good
two.
with words, and we even go back to the 80s where we first met one another
That's
at Mount
true.
Perrin Church of God
That's
and
true.
the music ministry over there, and Mylon Lefevre and all that wonderful stuff that was happening at Airborne in the
That's
80s.
true.
And David, I'll tell you, your voice has remained consistent. I love your poetic voice because you love history, you love poetry, you love those things that keep us reminded that it's just not always about the present. But
Right.
we don't have a present without the past.
That's true.
And so talk to us about your inspiration behind Godspeed.
Well, it's kind of a it's a strange story because to tell you the truth, I didn't want to write this book. I really didn't. And what this book does, a little explanation, that camera there. I've taken the words of notable reformers like William Tyndale. William Tyndale has a main seat in here, and he's not typically known as one of the major reformers, but he is an English reformer. He gave us our English Bible. He gave us our language that we speak today. It basically takes reformers like Luther, Calvin, Melanchthon. Benita loves it when I say that word. It's the way I pronounce it, I think. Melanchthon. And actually some women too. Catherine Parr, Henry VIII's sixth wife, one of the more lucky ones that actually survived him. But I didn't want to do this book, and I actually talk about that in the book. You said
what was it about that?
Well, a moment ago you were talking about my voice, and you said you used the word poet or poetic and prophetic in the same sentence, and surprisingly, and it's an after effect that I actually saw. This book does have, I've actually restrained my lyricism in here, but there is a prophetic edge in this book, and it started, I think, when I did Kicked and Screamed about not doing, I didn't want to do another devotional, for one thing, because it asks a very different thing of an author. 365 micro chapters, you know. But even deeper than that, and this is just by way of confession, I felt like for quite a while I had become off rails, gone off rails spiritually, and I didn't want to do a book as a fraud or an imposter, and that's not the easiest thing to say, but the beautiful thing about that, I began to, because I was pretty well read in Martin Luther and in William Tyndale, because I did a book on William Tyndale in 2012. But as I began to read these guys and started reading Calvin, started reading John Knox and Philip Melanchthon and some of the English reformers, and even the story of Anne Askew, I started getting into the depths of these people and realized, and as I began writing the book, writing pieces for the book, I realized there's two streams in this book. One is the Reformation, which October 31st is the official 500th anniversary of the Reformation. But as I began to read these guys, I realized this book has, it's got two streams, the Reformation, which is historical, I'll get it out, historical, and reform, which is more of a spiritual thing. And that's that's a poor way to say that. I don't want to say that it's a spiritual movement, but it kind of is. It has a spiritual element to it. Because as I began to read these guys, and reading them is not without consequence, I began to feel something stirring in me. I felt like I had lost my first love. And there were a lot of people back then. I mean, there was only one church at the time, the Roman Catholic Church. And so, you know, to make a long story short, Luther comes along. He's kind of like the big bang of the Reformation.
Yes.
And everything changes. All of a sudden, people have choices that they really didn't have before. So there's a large swath of people, common people, because they had never had a Bible in their own language before, not until after the official opening of the Reformation. Martin Luther did a German Bible in 1522. William Tyndale did the English Bible in 1526, the first English Bible that gave us phrases like, "Give us this day our daily bread," and "For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory," things we associate with the King James Bible.
Yes.
But it was William Tyndale, 80 years before that. And so I realized that the struggle that I had, that kicking and screaming, was really all a part of the writing process.
Well, talk to us about the relevance of the Reformation.
Sure.
I mean, we often think that it's just a big piece of church history,
Sure.
you know, back there in that old century.
I'm so glad you asked that question. That's a very good question, because you know, if you can't find relevance in history, then it's pretty much like just a curiosity, you know, or a benign curiosity or entertainment. You know, but as I began to read these guys, and I realized, and I want to kind of. Because, you know, I don't want to talk politics. And one of the things that I've read so much of William Tyndale. I was even on National Geographic earlier this year as a Tyndale spokesperson, which that was pretty cool. But William Tyndale, if you read enough of him, when he talks politics, you can tell that his needle is straight up. And he encourages.
We've got about 2 minutes before the end of this segment.
Okay, he encourages a kind of Christ-like indifference to politics. And I'm prefacing what I want to say because of that. Because 500 years ago, you had very similar conditions that you do in our American culture today. It was a drunk culture. You know, back then, the Catholic Church was drunk with rage for the heretic. They were drunk on their glitter of their own image. They were drunk on their obscenity, the obscene wealth. And Henry VIII is a good example of a malignant narcissism that he led with. And he was drunk on that, and the common man was drunk on the intoxications of the Roman Church, the superstition and all that stuff that had been a part of the Roman Catholic experience all their lives. So it was drunk culture. So here comes Luther and the Reformers, and their words are very sober. Their words they reach deep. They have a deep penetration. But think about it, William Tyndale particularly. For 12 years that he translated the Bible, he had a target on his back, price on his head. Catholic Church wanted him dead because a Bible in your own tongue was outlaw. And so the words that he spoke and the words that are in here from all the Reformers, you can imagine, he cuts right to the chase. They speak with a clarity that sparkles, like the acoustic guitar, like an old acoustic guitar, the sheen of an old acoustic guitar.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because it is so relevant for the days in which we live in.
Absolutely.
A narcissistic culture, a culture drunk on its own
exactly.
decadence.
Yeah,
So when we come back, we're going to
culture. Yeah.
When we come back, we'll talk more about that. Stick around after this break. We're going to talk more with David Teems, a beautiful conversation, a great poet. Stay with me. After this break, we'll be right back with more of Babbie's House. Welcome back to Babbie's House. I've been talking today with David Teems, the author of Godspeed, Voices of the Reformation. David is a poet. He's also a prophet. He's a singer. He's a songwriter. His words carry weight because he loves the Word of God. He loves God's people. I want him to read a devotional, January 1, from Godspeed, and then before we close our show, read it for us, David.
Okay, this is from William Tyndale. And William Tyndale, he has kind of center stage in here, but he's well earned it. But it's called Evergreen. Evergreen by William Tyndale. And this is the quote from Tyndale. Tyndale says this: "Where the Spirit is, it is always summer." I love that. I shouldn't even read anymore. Living daily with the threat of death liberated the gospel in William Tyndale in marvelous ways, known and unknown to him. It was vibrant, evergreen, weightless like his English. It made a high music in him. In this passage, Tyndale comes close to saying the unsayable. We are given some sense of his inwardness, the serenity, the possession, the profound hush of his spirit. its soft sparkle. He is aware how close death is. He lives with it and just outside it. When his heart rose, the English rose with it. Then there's a section down here. It's a benediction. It says, may you know Tyndale's summer and the life that fills it, that warms it, and gives it light.
Mm.
Then,
you know, David, all of these reformers have a voice.
yes.
You know, there's a certain style, there's a certain poetic voice that they carry in history and in the church. You can, just like a singer's voice, like Aretha's voice, like David Teems' voice or Babbie's voice, you hear it and immediately you recognize it. I thank God for the voice that God has given you. It is just a gorgeous writer's voice, a trusted voice as well, that when David Teems writes, you know it's going to be the voice of truth. So thank you for coming on the show
Thank
today.
you.
Tell us how we can get a copy of this book.
Of course, the usual haunts, Amazon and places like that. They can go to my website, davidteems.com.
And what about your music?
There too, you know, and that's funny because I put music way to the side for a few years, and it's just with the advent of this book that it's like starting all over. But you know what? I had lost the joy of it. I had lost the joy of music, and I felt like doing books was more of an artistic evolutionary process. But now that I'm doing music again, I'm just having a blast with it because all my pretensions, I've thrown them off one over the other.
We're not trying to impress anybody.
I'm free.
We're doing it to the glory of God. I know that's what we are free.
You know.
Listen, thank you for coming on the show today, my friend.
Thank you. I love you.
You are a blessing.
I love you so much.
And I love you too, my friend. And you are blessed. And we are blessed to have your voice in the earth. And come back and see us, all right?
I'd love to.
My good friend David Teems, I'm so glad that he came this way. Listen, will you do me a favor and email me at babbie@babbie.com. Visit my official website at babbie.com. Let me know that you've heard today's show. I know that these beautiful words have encouraged your heart. God bless you and keep you, and thank you so much for watching Babbie's House today. Until next time, God bless you real good. Bye-bye for now.